All right, let's talk about a movie called The Devil All the Time. It's got Tom Holland in it, but trust me, ain't no Spider-Man shit going on here, not even close. So it starts off with this guy by the name of Willard. He had just came back from the war, and he stops in a spot to get coffee and donuts. He ends up talking to this waitress by the name of Charlotte. That same waitress eventually he would get married to and have a kid by the name of Arvin. They got themselves a little house in the cut that they really couldn't afford, but bottom line is he's gonna do whatever he can to pay it off. Arvin, they also got him a dog by the name of Jack. So every day we come to the backyard, he's got this cross set up or whatever, right? And he always tells him to pray for things, you know what I'm saying? Because, prayer heals the world and everything's going to be all right, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of religious fanatics around there. Don't. That's part of the story, I'll tell you. But Willard's particular reason for having a cross there is fucked up. So they give us this flashback in the war about this Marine by the name of Miller. He got caught up by the Japanese army and he was still hanging on a cross, skinned alive, but still alive. And Willard had to put him out of his misery. I'm like, shit. Now keep in mind, it was at war times. This is probably like one thing out of like fucking millions of things he's probably seen. But that one just happened to stick in his head. And why the fuck wouldn't it? Now around the same time, Willard would go with his mom and dad to church and stuff like that, right? Now, before meeting Charlotte, they already had somebody that wanted to line up for her. This nice girl by the name of Helen. Now the thing about Helen is, they was trying to hook her up with Willard because, she's a nice girl. And the fact that she's lonely. Now, why is she lonely? Because her family got burnt up in a daggone fire, yo. I'm like, fuck. She was literally the only one left. Now, the guy preaching the sermon is this dude by the name of Roy. Now, yeah. I think he's the same actor that played the Penguin in the Gotham series. So, yeah, picture that face being a preacher. So he's preaching on and on about his sermons or whatever like that. Now, this crazy part about this sermon. Now, he's afraid of spiders, right? He says God can overcome all. Now, he has this jar of spiders in his hand, right? He takes the spiders out and dumps them on his face. I'm like, nigga, if y'all don't understand, if I haven't told you this before, I hate fucking spiders. The movie Arachnophobia is not a comedy, it's a horror show. But anyway, somehow this same preacher is going to end up hooking up with Helen. Oof. Now, after some time, Roy and Helen end up having a baby. They name her Lenora. Now, I got this one scene where Willard and Arvin are praying by the tree, right? And these two guys come up and they keep talking about you got that pretty little wife at home, blah, 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 acting like they're going to do something, whatever. Now, they're just fucking around, but Willard obviously thinks they're not. So Willard waits for a while, and then he's driving in the car with Arvin and Jack, whatever like that. He's going to catch these niggas one by one, and he ends up beating the shit out of them. They wasn't talking about shit about messing with Charlotte again. There you go. So around this time, he's paying off the house or whatever like that. Then, unfortunately, Charlotte ends up catching cancer. And the doctors can't cure it. So you know what Willard's going to do. He's going to go back to the tree and pray about it. But it kept getting worse. Then Willard decides to come up with this idea. You know how people think that God needs one sacrifice to save another? So his idea was to kill Jack and offer him up to the Lord so that he'll save Charlotte. Guess what the fuck happens? Charlotte ends up dying the next morning. They had the funeral and everything. And here's the crazy part. They end up going back to the house, right? Arvin wakes up because he thinks he heard some type of commotion. And then he sees his dad by the tree. But guess what? Willard ended up slitting his throat, done deal dead as shit. So where's the dog? The dog is hanging on the fucking cross. Yo, there's some disturbing shit. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So you can tell at this point, Arvin has no faith in any religious beliefs. You know what I'm saying? So the cop that comes by does this investigation. A cop by the name of Lee. I'll explain him along the way, boy. So the look this cop is giving Arvin is like, yo, now why is he giving Arvin this look? Because Arvin was eating a pie that was sitting out there. He had a whole bunch of pie on his face or whatever like that. This was before he got in the house. So all this pie is all across his face or whatever like that. It looks like a blood trail. But he reassures him it's like, no, it's just pie. So back to Roy and Helen. There's been times where Roy would hide himself in a room. Now, why is this? Because he did a couple of sermons with the spiders thing, and then turns out one of the spiders ended up biting his face. And then his face would be swollen for weeks at a time. Nigga. So I guess it was every now and then, or whatever the case may be, Helen would drop off Lenora at Willard's parents' house. This going to tie in too. She gets back in the car with Roy and, what's the Roy's friend name? We will call him Henry. Anyway, he sits in the car, Roy and Helen go to this spot in the woods, right? They go up there to pray on some things, and then all of a sudden, Roy comes out of nowhere with a fucking screwdriver and stabs on her goddamn neck. I'm like, what the fuck? He basically killed her, done deal, did his shit. Now, here's his thing. He thought the Lord would have him resurrect her back to life. When that didn't happen, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, nigga. They start driving or whatever like that. They going down to wherever they supposed to be going. Henry's sitting there telling them everything anybody else would tell him, like, the fuck, we gotta get the fuck out of here. Next thing you know is morning, Henry wakes up because he was asleep, and he sees that Roy done dipped off. We're like, where the fuck did Roy go? He ends up hitchhiking with these two people by the name of Carl and Sandy. Whew. Now the thing is, Carl had met Sandy in the same cafe Willard had met Charlotte in. Charlotte and Sandy were both waitresses at the time. Let me tell you, this couple has a totally different direction in life as opposed to Willard and Charlotte. So basically, they're trying to drive Roy out of town or whatever like that, but that's not really their intention. So all three of them get out the car, they end up going to this spot by the lake. And the thing is, Carl wants him to have sex with Sandy while he's taking pictures. Clearly, Roy feels apprehensive about all this. So Roy refuses to do it. Carl ends up killing him. Done deal, daddy shit. Roy's done deal. So Carl's got this fetish about taking pictures with people, you know what I'm saying? Just chilling with his wife and whatever like that. Man, at this point, this is the second time they've done this. They've done this at least 15 times now. For personal amusement, who the fuck knows? And at that point, Sandy's getting tired of it, but she's still gonna stick around with Carl. I'm not really sure how he makes his money off it because he can't show it to anybody, but I don't know anyway. So now that Arvin's parents are dead, he's gonna live with the uncle and his aunt. And since Lenore's parents are now officially dead, she's living with the uncle and aunt. So there you go. They took them both on men. Years go by, Lenore's in high school. She's a religious fanatic. Arvin is clearly the opposite of all that. She goes to visit her mom's grave like every day. She thinks her father will come back soon, so apparently she don't know what happened to Roy. I'm not sure if anybody does. Now they got this new preacher, this guy by the name of Preston. He does this sermon about bringing in red meat and white meat, the good stuff. The rich people can bring in what they can, but what about poor people? He was like, got a plate of organs over here, and he was actually taken into the organs. The problem is, it was the plate that Arvin's grandmother fixed. So obviously she felt humiliated and embarrassed. But even that is only going to give you a slight indication of what Preston's all about. Whew. So the thing is, when Lenore gets out of school, she gets picked on by these dudes or whatever, right? You know Arvin ain't having that shit. So he ends up catching these niggas one by one. One of them was trying to have sex with this chick on the bus, right, in the back of the building or whatever like that. He ends up pulling her out the bus and beating him with a crowbar and shit. The other two dudes, one of them's fixing the car, one of them's got his hood on the dashboard or whatever like that. Arvin comes out of nowhere, slams a hood on his head, and then beats up the other dude in the car damn near to death. And then he walks off like a straight G. Bottom line is, they don't fuck with his sister like that no more. Now back to Carl and Sandy. Carl's about to go get a camera or whatever like that. Sandy hears a knock at the door. Turns out it's Lee. Now what the heck is Lee doing there? Well, Sandy is actually Lee's sister. Let me tell you about Lee. Lee is kind of corrupt cop or whatever like that. But the thing is, he doesn't want anything going south and this, that, third, because he's up for election, whether he's going to be a sheriff, mayor, I'm not sure what's going on. But he was up for election when Arvin was little. I was like, damn, how long is this fucking election going to take? So basically, he's kind of a crooked cop trying to get up in the ranks. Kind of. So before Lee came in the house, Sandy was looking at all these pictures of all their victims. And as she was putting them away, she happened to accidentally drop one that we're not aware of. But Lee was aware of it. He took the picture. Obviously thinking to himself like, Sandy, what the fuck are you into? Boy, if he only knew. He probably wouldn't have done anything because honestly, it's his sister, and two, he's into some other shit too. I'll explain that in a minute. Matter of fact, I'll explain it now. He ends up meeting with this dude by the name of Leroy, and he's got his henchman, Bobo. Basically, Leroy's been funding him money. Now, what does Leroy do? Let's just say he's involved in a couple of shady things. But Leroy's basically helping Lee to keep his nose clean, you know what I'm saying? Elections and things of that nature, you know what I'm saying? Whether he's going to run for a sheriff or mayor, who the hell knows? But he wants to make sure he's like, look, keep Sandy out of certain establishments, you know what I'm saying? Because considering what she's doing, it don't look good. So then when Arvin handled these niggas, you know what I'm saying? Lenore was by herself going to her mom's grave, whatever. Then it started raining. She goes inside the church and Preston's already in there. So they're like conveying to each other and all this stuff. And then he takes her in the car. Now, because she's such a religious fanatic, she's going along with everything Preston's saying, including a situation where he's like trying to get her to take off her clothes. You know what I'm saying? Shed your skin for the Lord or whatever like that. I'm like, the manipulation is on all-time levels. Regardless how young this preacher looks, let's just say he shouldn't be doing a lot of these things to this girl, a high school girl in a fucking car. I can't explain it because they don't even show it. Just leave that to your imagination. Ugh. So a couple days go by, she be getting sick and she can't go to church. She was throwing up. And I'm thinking to myself, ugh. They think she's just sick, but I think she's probably having morning sickness. Yeah. So basically, Lenore says she'll be fine to visit a grave by herself for obvious reasons. But Arvin's cool with it because he's about to get a part-time job working at the docks anyway, so there you go. Now, I forgot to bring this one scene up, but I'm bringing it up on purpose because this is where it becomes important. In this scene where everybody's sitting at the table with Arvin and the family and Lenore, his uncle gives him a present. It ends up being a gun. It's actually a present from his dad. Now, his dad, Willard, had got this gun from the war. Now, apparently, Willard told his dad this is the same gun that Adolf Hitler shot himself with. I was like, is it legit or is it something they just wanted to throw into the movie? let him have it, I guess. So we found out Preston's been doing more things with Lenora. And now she comes back home, right? He kind of dismisses her afterwards, but here's why. Lenora's in this trance and she ends up going to the barn. We find out Lenora is carrying a baby, and he's been using mind manipulation to talk her into getting rid of it. I'm like, whew. So she's going to the barn. She's basically about to hang herself, yo. But right when she's having second thoughts, she slips off the bucket and she ends up hanging herself. Done deal, dead as shit. I'm like, yo. And Arvin is the main one that finds her in the barn. Ugh. So after they had the funeral, Arvin goes to work, and a police officer comes and tells him something. Now, apparently, somebody spread word. I'm not sure who figured it out or what happened. Spread the word and let him know that, your sister was pregnant. That's about to set Arvin the fuck off because he knows she's only been chilling around one person. So, he putting two and two together. Boy. So Arvin ends up going back to the house, getting the gun that his father gave him. You know what time it is. So we find out he's been stalking Preston. Preston is doing the same thing to another chick. And then we find out he actually got a wife at home. Boy, these preachers around here, man. So he catches him in the church by himself, and he's like, I got some things to confess. So he puts him at ease at first, and he starts talking about things. Now, clearly, the preachers, you putting two and two together, he's like, wait a minute, this motherfucker's been following me. He gives him a chance to talk. Bottom line is, everything he says out of his mouth is making it worse. You know what I'm saying? Arvin ends up shooting him 3 times, done dealing his ass dead as shit. And then Arvin gets up out of there. Now, around the same time, I guess Lee had enough. He was going to Leroy's house. Bobo was fixing up eggs and all this other stuff. And he was like, hey, remember that gun you showed me up at the diner? Apparently, they showed him some type of special gun or whatever like that. He went into the other room. Boy, he picked that shit up and banged off in the back of Bobo's head. He's done deal. And he goes upstairs to Leroy. Leroy's looking like, yeah, you know what time it is. And Leroy gets done deal too. So I guess Lee's like, fuck it at this point. So Arvin's driving out of town, but then his car stops. He's like, fuck. So then the next morning, he's about trying to catch hitchhikers or whatever like that. Guess who picks him the fuck up? Carl and goddamn Sandy. So now he's in the car with them, you know what I'm saying? They go to a rest stop. He sees Carl getting out the car, but sees a gun in his back pocket. So he's like, all right, Arvin's hip to the shit. So after Carl takes a piss, he goes to the trunk, whatever. He comes back for the trunk. He's got his camera and his gun in his hand. But before he can do anything, Arvin bangs off 2 shots and them done deal dead as shit. Now, Sandy doesn't want to shoot him because actually she wants to use Arvin because she planned on killing Carl anyway. So she got nervous and shot and done deal. So are both of them shot? No, apparently Sandy's the only one dead. How is this possible? Well, they show a flashback of Carl not really trusting Sandy like that over the years. So he ends up slipping in blanks in her fucking gun, yo. And that's how Arvin was lucky to survive this shit. He gets Carl's wallet, gets some money, and then takes out a picture, right? They don't show it, but it's a picture of their first victim. So Arvin at this point is basically about to head back to his old house where his father Willard used to stay at. So when he gets there, this old man is there, the same old man that helped him out when he was little, tells him that house was burnt down like years ago. So he's like, oh well. So he's basically going to go back there to the memorial of his dog, yo. Now, meanwhile, Lee finds out his sister's been done deal dead as shit. Then he gets some information about a preacher dying too. He finds out it has something to do with Lenora putting the 2 and 2 together, and he's like, okay, I know who it is. So while Arvin's in the woods, we hear footsteps or whatever like that. Turns out it's Lee. He knew exactly who was there. Lee came out there talking about he just want to talk. Meanwhile, he got this big-ass shotgun, and we know he ain't above murking niggas either, you know what I'm saying? Arvin ends up catching Lee off guard, ends up banging off on him behind a log. Right before Lee dies, he gives him the picture. Last thing we see is him getting a ride from this hippie or whatever like that. They're heading to Cincinnati. And he starts reflecting on everything, thinking to himself, does he want to go to the military too? He doesn't know what he wants to do, ends up falling asleep. And that's the end of the movie. Nigga. Like I said, Tom Holland's in it, but this ain't no Spider-Man. Not even close. That was an experience. The Devil All the Time on Netflix. Check it out.